I think a lot of coaches abuse their power. They abuse the position they're in. And at the end of the day, the kids have the power, and we've got to be able to find a way to get the most out of them, and whatever that looks like. And like I said, I've made my career on empowering our girls and trying to make them feel empowered on the floor, off the floor, make them know they're capable of stuff, and trying to be there for them.
This is the Mental Metal Podcast, where we explore how to forge mental toughness and resilience in every aspect of life. Welcome, I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm an ICF certified professional coach with a background as a teacher, basketball coach, and athletic director. But my journey took a dramatic turn in 2020 when I survived both cancer and a stroke. Those experiences shaped my mission to help others grow stronger in every facet of life. Today, I work with athletes, coaches, educators, and anyone who believes that positive mental health is both achievable and a personal responsibility. This podcast is dedicated to helping listeners develop a positive version of toughness, one rooted in resilience, focus, and growth. Whether you're looking to excel on the field, in the classroom, or in life, this is your space to learn, grow, and take action. Join me on this journey, and together, let's forge your mettle. Parents, is your athlete ready for the upcoming sports season? They might have the strength, the speed, and the skills, but without confidence, they can still struggle when the game is online. Skill and strength are great, they're necessary, but they're not used to their full potential without the right mentality. Confidence is key. It's the key to unlocking that full potential. And at Mental Metal Coaching, I offer personalized sessions designed to build the confidence your athlete needs for a successful season. My proven techniques empower them to perform under pressure, both on the field and in life. Don't let a lack of confidence hold them back. Book a free session today and discover the power of confidence. Visit the website, get started on the journey to a more confident, successful athlete with Mental Metal Coaching. And welcome back to the Mental Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and I'm here with my guest today, Clint Burris of the Lady Knights of Olney Central College basketball. And I'm excited to have you on, Coach. I don't know. I think you've been paying attention at least the month of February here, doing a lot of stuff on faith and how faith can be related to mental toughness. And we're going to have a conversation about a lot of stuff. But I definitely want to talk about some of your ideas about coaching, mental toughness, and about your faith. And I think it's going to fit in really well with some of the stuff I'm working on now and some of the stuff I'm showcasing. So I'm excited to have you on, and we can talk about that. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Well, we're excited. I'm excited to be here. Something that, we've put a lot of time and effort into with the mental side of coaching, especially coaching female athletes at a young age, 18 to 21 years old. We've dealt a lot with mental toughness, mental health, all of those things. And, we're excited to be on here, and if somebody can listen and somebody can be impacted, then that's what it's all about.
So it's interesting when you talk about coaching female athletes. I think I by no way, shape, or form do I want to be sexist about this, but there's a difference in mentality between the female athlete and the male athlete. Now, from what I've seen, and of course there's always outliers and exceptions, right? So a lot of times people will see, well, the female athletes are harder on themselves, and that is absolutely true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're less mentally tough. It's just they really struggle with self-image, self-doubt, things like that. Guys can go the other way to a dangerous degree, right? A lot of times they're overconfident or arrogant or whatever like that, or even worse, it's a show. It's not, you know what I mean? So personally, whenever I'm working with a female athlete, they're more open to the idea of, hey, I need some help trying to figure this out, where the guys are more resistant. So I don't know if the difference is one is more mentally tough than the other, but the females are more likely to be like, hey, I'd like some help with this. I struggle with this, and own up to it. So we
100%.
see it more.
Well, and as a male athlete, and I've told our players this, I mean, I grew up in male locker rooms with male coaches. Like we had our vision of what sports were. And I kind of got my eyes open really quickly when I switched over to the women's side. I think the story I tell the most is I remember UConn and Notre Dame were number 1 and number 2 in the country women's basketball. And me and my wife were like, hey, let's watch this game tonight. We didn't have kids at the time. We're like, hey, we're going to watch this game. We had dinner. I turned to ESPN and there's cornhole. I turned to ESPN and there's poker. And I'm like, this is the number 1 versus number 2 team in the country, and it's not on TV. Now, in today's world, there's 75 different streaming outlets that would have it on. But I'm like, this is where we're at. And it kind of was my first eye-opening thing of where women's sports was. And this was 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think and that filters all the way down into it's not as important. And I think it's a big
100%.
focus now. I think it's growing in popularity and it's getting a little bit more focus, which really helps out the female athletes.
And I think that goes back to what you were talking about, their mental toughness. They've had to fight for every single thing they've done. And I've tried to be an ambassador for our female athletes. And, there's nothing more frustrating than, our girls sitting here and they finish a game, we compete, we win, we do whatever. It's a huge game. And then 5 times more people roll in at 7:00 for the men's team, no matter what their record is. And there was one game we had about 7 or 8 years ago before COVID. And the times got switched and we played the 3:00 or 7:00 game and the guys played at 5:00. And I'm like, hey, maybe we're going to have a crowd. And I, to this day, will never forget the feeling I had for my players as I watched 75% of the people in the gym stand up and walk out during our warm-ups.
It's tough.
And they're young and they're whatever, but man, I felt so bad for my players in that point, and I felt helpless not being able to help them. That's kind of something we've always kind of, emphasized with our players is we have a lot of support in our community. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but we have a smaller circle than what our men's program, and it's not just at OCC, it's everywhere. You know that.
Oh no.
So we've done a really good job of trying to get our girls and our student athletes to focus on, hey, let's cherish the people that we do have, and let's cherish the people that are here and really show them the love and give everything. And, we're not for everybody. Female athletics is not for everybody. And I'm not belly aching or anything. It's just the way it is. People watch men's sports more than they do women's sports, and it's just what it is. And like you said, it's changed. The landscape has changed drastically in the last 15 years.
Yeah, it has. And I wasn't ever saying, we just I really wasn't supposed to be what I thought the focus was going to be, but it just it's but it's interesting because anytime I get a female athlete that needs some help with their confidence stuff and I work with them, man, we have a lot of progress because they're open to the idea.
Yep,
and
100%.
Again, the guys sometimes can be a little bit more resistant to it, but
that's what I was getting at is I think the female athletes are more conditioned for that, and they've got to fight some of those different demons that the guys don't have to fight. They've got that internal, they're competitive. They're just as competitive. They are
Absolutely.
just as mean. They're just as crazy. They're all those things. They're just as confident in a lot of areas, but the externals are so weighing on them that I think that mental health side of it is more probably relevant on the women's side. And it is a little more fragile, but I think it's not anything because of them. Because you're married, you know how it is. Women are as tough as it gets, man. And they're going to fight, they're going to scratch, and they're going to claw, and they're going to come together and or go apart and fight and scratch and claw with each other. It just depends. So they're mentally tougher, but they're also more willing to ask for that help.
Yeah, and which is I think a big part of. Well, I think if we're really getting into the sexes here, but I think that the old school idea that if you don't not asking for help is a toughness thing, and that is it's a ridiculous notion.
And it's something that we've had to overcome as males too.
Absolutely,
and you're soft if you ask for help or you show weakness, and it's just a different world. And you go back to even more stuff like social media. They're judged. They are look at Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and all those people, Paige Beckers. Anytime something's on, they're so scrutinized and all that, and everything's out there. There's nowhere to hide in 2025 from any weakness at all.
Yeah, and so that kind of brings me back to when you're talking about the not asking for help and the old school ideas of toughness. Give me a little bit of your background growing up and playing.
Well, kind of grew up in played high school basketball in the early 2000s, 99 to 2004. And still that, I had two big brothers. You got to talk to Mike a little bit. He's a Division I assistant coach. He was my assistant coach here at OCC. We had some battles myself between him and I, and, that toughness side. And he and I were a lot different players. We played different. I'm more of a kind of go do what I have to do. And I just, he's hard nosed, and we butted heads a few times with that. And, then I went and played for Joe Cravens at Weber State in Utah. Division I basketball is a whole new world. As you know, that Division I athletics is a whole new level of mental toughness and all those things. Plus I was a kid that when I was here at OCC, I'm from Southern Indiana. I would beat my parents home on a Saturday night after a game because they were hanging out with Mike. I wanted to go home. And then I went to school in Utah. So, it was a 9-hour flight and a 30-hour drive. And so I had to grow up, and I went from being a homebody every weekend to I got to go home at Christmas. So I had to kind of grow up that junior year of college. Our coach got fired after my junior year, and I transferred to Edwardsville and played for Marty Simmons. So you want to talk about toughness? I actually just at Belleville this Saturday, two of my college roommates were there, or college teammates were there that we played with at Marty, and we were telling some stories, and I'm like, whew, man, that's how we were coached, and that's how we were raised, and I think I've been able to, over 15 years, take some of that and manipulate it into how do you change that? How would I want to be coached in today's world? Because you still got to have that toughness, the accountability, and all that stuff. But, a lot of the stuff that we dealt with isn't going to fly in today's world, right?
Well, and I think that's it, is trying to figure out, I'm all about toughness and teaching toughness and whatever, but I think, again, there's a misguided notion about what toughness is, and that I need these kids to be tough, so I'm just going to go in the locker room and yell at them every night. Like, well, that might make them tough, but they're also going to hate you, and you're going to cause some negativity, and and you're just going to lean into some of the self-doubt that they already have. So there's a better way to do it.
Well, and my first few years, I can't lie, I was really bad about it, and I got, 20 technicals in my first 4 years because I came from the men's side. And, I'm a loud guy. I'm a big guy. And there's a lot less people in the gym at 5 o'clock for our games. And, I was like, I got to go prove myself, and I got to do this. And once again, that self-doubt stuff, can I actually do this? And I've kind of taken a long time to kind of create my own path with what we're doing. But it kind of and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I don't yell at our kids. But we've tried with, we're freshmen and sophomores in college. So that is a very unique time. We're trying to get these kids away from home. They're trying to, they don't want to be away from home. They do want to be away from home. How do we make these decisions? It's their first time away from home. So there's tough decisions to be made on a Friday night or a Saturday night. So we're trying to help mold that. And the thing that I found in the first year or two coaching women's basketball, and I think even it's basketball or sports in general, is if those kids know that you care about them, they're going to run through a wall for you. And I think, that's why we were able to be coached the way we were back in the day, because we knew our coaches cared about us. And our parents let them coach us. And I mean, my high school coach, I still talk to him weekly. My Coach Simmons, we talk about, if I walked into the gym and he was there, we'd sit down and talk for hours. Coach Cravens, he was the first one to yell at us, but he still likes every post on Facebook and is watching my kids grow up. I mean, they're there, they know it. And that's why I think, you talk with Mike about, coaches he's had, and same way with me. I've had some great leaders that have helped show those things. And Marty Simmons was one of those that, I had a coach that I knew that coached under Marty, and he said the first question he asked him in his interview was, "What kind of dad are you?" And, that's the type of stuff that I've tried to, I want to be a good dad. I mean, I have 5 kids, 11 to 5. And that's my thing, is I don't want my kids to, grow up and be like, man, I wish dad was here more. And I think that's the thing I love about, coaching at this level. And my kids come to practice, they go to games, we travel together. It's all that. And I get to be dad too.
Well, I think one of the things I've figured out talking to different coaches is this idea of, how hard you can be on your kids and how hard you can get on them and yell at them and stuff like that. And if you're being like an expectation toughness level of a 10, that the level of love you show them and care has to be probably an 11 or a 12, right? Like it cannot be the other way around. If you're giving them more expectations and blasting them more than you are showing love, it's a quick way to lose the kids. And that's what that means is, good or bad, coaching is it's an all-in thing. Like you can't, that's why you come home from coaching and you're like, I'm exhausted. It's
parenting. It is literally just like parenting. You got to be able to discipline them and show them that tough love, but they also got to know you love them. And you've got to be able to, the great coaches can tell you what they need to do. They can criticize, they can constructive criticize, but then you got to be there and ready to put your arm around them and pick them up. And I've found that praise is just as encouraging and just as effective to get players to do what they want as punishment, or, because, man, these kids just want to feel like they are doing the right thing for you. At the end of the day, you saying, hey, I'm proud of you, is 1,000 times more productive than telling you that I'm mad at you or you didn't do it right. And, when we watch film, we try to show them, hey, here's what it looks like when we do it right. And yes, we got to show you some of the things, but we emphasize that, we emphasize a lot of we've got to show you how it looks when it's right. As opposed to always, here's wrong, here's wrong, here's wrong.
I work with a lot of athletes, and I get to have their, honest opinion about the things that are bothering them with their coach and stuff like this. And I try to coach them around it and stuff like that.
Yep.
And these ideas where that, like, if an athlete has to go into film session and listen to watch last night's game for 2 hours and just have you sit there and point out what they did wrong, it's you're going backwards.
They're going to tone you out.
Absolutely. And you're starting,
it's just
and you're
like
feeding it. Yeah, absolutely. It has to be, you have to show them what they got to get better at, but there has to be praise there. There just has to. That's what you build on.
Well, and we've had a lot of success in our time. We don't have the best facilities. We don't have the best scholarships. We don't have all that. So we've had to get players that are kind of on that verge of being successful that, maybe didn't even want to play basketball. There's a lot of kids that we have, that it's between us and just going to school. Hey, I'm going to play for a year and that's going to be it. So that's a lot harder to coach than a kid that, hey, I want to go play at the 4-year level. Because what motivates them, So you got to be able to build these kids up, build these players. I say kids, they're adults. But we got to build these girls up, or these players or whatever. And we got to build them up so that they can, look good, feel good, play good. Right. And to me, if I'm constantly tearing these kids down, what's that motivation to go out and play for Coach Burris? What's that motivation?
The only motivation they get is that they want to do something to spite you. And
100%.
That, you know what? That can work for a game or two, right? I've really
said
can.
That before too. I've said that in the past too. Like, just go prove me wrong or whatever. And you're right.
But it's a short term. It's a short term motivator with some long term damaging effects, right? If you're constantly doing things to prove people wrong and because you're mad at them and stuff like that, it's just Man, it's hard on the soul.
Well, and we talked about it, you know, our pastor, Tim, that works with us with our Knights for Christ and everything. And we've had conversations. He said, there's a big difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation, I got to motivate you. I shouldn't have to motivate you to go hard. And we talk about it all the time. You know, Mike and I, especially, you know, we talk recruiting and stuff. Playing hard and being a good teammate used to be a given. And now it's a recruitable asset, and playing hard and how you treat people and all that, it's recruitable. So you got to look for those types of things that used to be a given. But, Pastor Tim always talks about you can motivate somebody, but it's not sustainable. It's that inspiring them to keep going and build and grow and want to be themselves motivated.
Yeah, I like that idea because it's one of the things I tell people that when they talk about what I do and somebody says something about me coming and being a motivational speaker. And I said, I am not a motivational speaker. A motivational speaker, you know what it's like when you go hear us, and there are really good ones. You leave a motivational speaker and you feel on top of the world and you're awesome. But like by 2 days, you're like, I can't even remember what that guy said. Like I like
for sure.
So you want to have sustainable tools and things to move forward, and what's your inspiration? What are you working on? What are you going to keep going on?
And so that's that empowerment.
I like that idea. Absolutely.
And that's something that, I remember when we played back in the day, if I would have came in a timeout and been like, hey, coach, I think we should go 2-3 zone. Like our coaches would have lost their minds.
Absolutely. Have a seat.
100%. Don't question me. And, I'm at that point with our girls. Like I've told them, I'm like, if you see something, you see a mismatch, you see some, and we've been in timeouts and you could ask any of my assistant coaches over the last 5 years. I mean, I'm in a timeout and, we're at John A. Logan, we're in overtime with 2 minutes to go. And we come over to timeout and I look at our girls and I said, you want to go man or you want to go zone? And they kind of look at me and I go, what are you guys more comfortable playing? And you know what? We went out, we picked, and it was the best 3-4 possessions of defense we've had all year because they had that empowerment. They were like, we told coach we wanted to do this, and now we've got to go perform. And like, that's kind of what we want with our players. And does it always work? Is it always the way for everybody? No. Am I going to do that every game? No. But there's that empowerment for them that they know. Or with recruiting, we're like, hey, are there any other kids you guys know that you'd like to be teammates with or whatever? And giving them kind of some of that, I hate to use the word power, but that, giving them some input or giving them, and kind of goes back to that look good, feel good, play good, which is that mental toughness, mental health, all those things.
What could you achieve if you had unshakable confidence? At Mental Coaching, I work with athletes, coaches, and professionals who are up for a challenge and ready to unlock their full potential. We offer individual coaching, group coaching, and professional development for schools and businesses. Whether you're looking to excel on the field, inspire your team, or thrive in your career, we'll give you the tools to face adversity head on and grow through every challenge. Don't wait to start living your life with confidence. Check the show notes for my contact information, and let's forge your medal together. Well, I think coaches need to remember that they're in charge of the program, but it's not their program. It's the kids' program, right? So you have to let them. You have to let them be a part of it and own it.
100%. And you can ask any player, anybody that talks to me. The one thing you'll never hear me say, and I'm no offense to any player or coaches that do this, they're not my players. They're not. This isn't my team. This is our team, and we've always had that mentality. That was one thing year one that I was like, hey, I'm lucky enough that my name's at the top, but there's a history. There's going to be a history when I'm done. I'm just in charge for this small period of time, and it's our program. And Jim Baker's my assistant coach, and he laughs. He just started helping me this spring, and he was like, "Hey, I said something in your office," and I go, "No, it's our office. It's not my office. It's our office. It's our program and our team." And like I said, that's something that I think our players, and you can get, we have an alumni day every year. It's actually this Saturday. and we're averaging in the last 8 years, we're averaging 22 to 23 players a year that come back. That to me is says a lot about our program.
Yeah, people are busy. That's a pretty good number just for to have people come back and bring their families and Yeah,
and we've we have players that come back and their little kids are sitting there and they've helped raise our kids. I say my little kids, they're not very little anymore, but they've been part of that. And it's like I said, it's that family, and we really doubled down on that. Every kid that commits to us, the first thing I say is welcome to the family, and that's part of it. And I think that's why it helps me. You know what I mean? It helps me sleep at night. It helps me. I want people that are positive influences for my children, for our community. And that's the little things. It's the getting the wedding invitations in the mail. It's the alumni days. It's, the, hey, coach, can you give me a reference for a job? All of those things. Wins are nice. They're great. They're the thing that everybody sees. But I was fortunate enough to get my 200th win this past January. And the first thing I said to our girls was, this is you guys. It's not me. And it's everybody that's played for us and all that. So I think that's one of the things that's really helped my mental health in the last 5-6 years is that, being able to, for every peak, there's a valley. So don't get too high. Yeah. And we play 30 games a year, and trying to keep that even keel throughout each day is not easy to do.
Well, you're talking the peaks and valleys, and something you said to me that you wrote was that you're talking about everybody's heard that speech about handle hard better, and it's I love it about how you got to be able to handle adversity because that's what mental toughness is. But you brought something up to me about you think the athletes need to be able to handle good better, and how 100%. That's mental toughness. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, and it's funny. My father-in-law is a semi driver, and he drives around, and he and I talk. He and I will talk, and it may be 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 30 minutes, but we kind of a lot during the basketball season. And he coached football. He's coached wrestling. He was a wrestler. So he's got a lot of different views of coaching stuff than I do. And, he talked to my son, Carson, and one of the things that he told him, he was like, to be a good winner, you got to be a good loser. And to be a good loser, you got to be a good winner. And I kind of took a step back, and it's something that the more I thought about, because, there's people that have won their whole life. There's people that have lost their whole life. There's people that have done both. And Coach Baker always asks the question to our recruits, do you hate to lose or love to win more? And it's interesting to hear kids' different answers. And I'm like, man, I grew up hating to lose because I was afraid of the punishment. And, what was going to happen at practice the next day if we got beat, which is fine. But I kind of lost track of how much I love to win. And when you go through adversity and you go through the hard and the ups and the downs of coaching and all of those things, I think one thing that I've found more is how do we handle ourselves when we win? And the graciousness and Mike and I have had this conversation. Winning at the college level, winning at the high school level, it's not easy. It is not easy to win at any sports level. And how do you handle that? And I think that's something that we try to get our players to do when we do win is, hey, let's celebrate, but let's do it in the locker room. Shake hands, let's go. We'll celebrate in the locker room. But there's some that it's hard to wait that long, right? There's some that are pretty good wins, and but you got to be a gracious winner too, right? And it helps you to win and lose. And unfortunately, we've lost quite a few games in my 15 years, but we've won quite a few. So, like I said, we've learned kind of how to manage that.
Well, I think it also, if you win too much, you stop looking for things you need to improve on. There's that too. Yeah. So, like, it's you have to be able to continue to want to grow. Was it Was it Kobe had the answer to that when somebody asked him about that, and he said he didn't care about either one. He just cared about getting better and
that's failure or losses or anything give you that opportunity to grow and what you can do. And I think Gino, everybody that coaches girls basketball listens to Gino, sure. Right? And one of the things he was talking about was that big run that they had of 115 wins or whatever, and they end up getting beaten the Final Four to Notre Dame, I think, or whatever. He said, I was begging to lose in November and December. He was like, I wanted it to end so bad because he said and this is the quote that still kind of gives me cold chills. He was like, we had juniors in college that had never lost a basketball game. He said, that is not normal.
No.
And it goes to your thing. I mean, you're talking about a high-level Division I basketball player that's played three and a half years of college basketball and never lost a game. Like, that's insane. And winning and losing are both hard to handle. And, we've spent a lot of times we're playing with 7 kids this year. We're the epitome of how to handle hard this year. And most games we do, and some games we don't.
Yeah, but you said it best when you're talking about it's not about the wins and losses. Because if you give me a coach that is focused on winning, and I'll show you a coach that's also focused on losing, and that's because those go together if that's 100%. Your focus.
Well, and it makes the highs and lows make it so hard, and it's so unhealthy. Yeah. It's so unhealthy mentally, physically to live and die. Now, I'm not saying when we get beat, I'm not frustrated, I'm not upset.
Absolutely,
it's got to be quick. And my wife and I don't always agree on this one, but I stat every game the night it happens. So I can get home at 1:00 in the morning and I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm going to work 3 hours and stat the game, because win or lose, my mindset has always been tomorrow's a new day. We got another game coming. Win or lose, I want it done, and I don't want to watch it the next day. I want it to be done and move on to that next one. And Saturday we had a tough one, and I was ready for it to be gone. So I got my stats done, and that's kind of one of those things that I've done as, and I'm not 100% on it, but I'm 95% of I'm doing the stats that night because I want to be able to turn that page the next day.
It's a good thought. It's a good intention anyway. So talk to me. I want to hear more about the Knights for Christ program that you started, and kind of your journey into that, because I know it's a new journey for you, and I want to hear about it.
Well, and here's the thing. I grew up, we went to church on Sundays, growing up. I went through high school, got baptized when I was in high school. Me and my cousins got baptized probably my sophomore, junior year in high school. And we went to church every Sunday. I would come home Saturday nights after my games at OCC, and we would go to church on Sunday, go to youth group on Sunday night, and drive back to Olney. And that was what I did. And I did it with my friends. I loved it. I loved our people at our church back home. And then I went to school in Utah, in the land of Mormon everywhere, and just didn't really have that connection that I had even in high school through my junior college years. And then I go to Edwardsville. I'm in a big city, don't really know anybody. There's no opportunities that I knew of to find it. Start coaching, going through. And, COVID came around, and my wife had became friends with my oldest daughter's kindergarten teacher. And they started going to church about right when Mount Gilead had opened up here north of town after COVID, and they started going. And we had been talking about, with 5 kids, we were like, we want to get into the church, right? We want to get back going to church. We both grew up. She went to a Catholic high school. So we both knew we wanted to be in the church. We wanted to be involved. We wanted our kids to be involved. And so COVID came, and she started hanging out. And Jim Baker, I don't know if you know Jim at all. He, is coached around here, phenomenal guy. And he and I started talking. They started coming to some games. And then we started going to church, and we started going. I got to know Pastor Tim Loomis a little bit. And Tim and Jim and I kind of just created a friendship. And then our church started this thing called Gimme 5. And what it was we did 5 Sundays in the fall, and you signed up for these classes, and Jim Baker was teaching one that he called ESPNC, Every Sports Fan Needs Christ. And every sports person needs Christ. And, we went down, and I got to kind of know with him, and Tim and I had kind of, talked about stuff. And he's like, man, I would love to get into OCC. He said, I drive by it all the time, and I would love an into OCC. And he goes, I feel like you were sent to our church for that reason somehow. And I said, so laying in bed one night talking to my wife about stuff, and I said, we need to start something at OCC. And she's like what? And I'm like, this Give Me Five that we did with Coach Baker. Like, it was 30 minutes. It was a short devotional. It was tied towards athletics. And I said, and it was the most fun and fulfilling 5 days of church I'd been to in those 2 years, probably in my life. Because it was something that really spoke to me, is like, it's athletics, right? We love sports. And the way Coach Baker, so we went to our president, who happens to go to our church, and our dean, who happens to go to our church. And we kind of threw out this idea of, like an FCA style group for student athletes. Right. And we're like, none of us really had any idea where it was going to go, what was going to happen. So we said, January, first Wednesday in January, we're going to start this. Let's see what happens. And my exact words to our president and our dean were, if we touch one kid, if we get one kid, it's worth it, whatever happens. And it was, my motivation was, when I went to college, I didn't have that. And I had a youth group back home, and I had, but when I went to school, I didn't have that connection. So if we can be some connection, then that's awesome. And honestly, selfishly, I hate to say it selfishly, I wanted it. I wanted that week, that once a week that wasn't church, that I could get with Pastor Tim and Coach Baker and whatever it was. And we have guest speakers all the time. And it started as, we had 7, 8 kids. Some days we may have 3. And every time we rolled in there for that whole semester, I said, hey, if it's 2 people or 10 people, let's do it. And we did it. We kept going. And then when this year rolled around, we were like, we're not going to miss the boat, and we're going to get this thing started. And we had an athlete meeting first week. We invited people. We had 29 kids show up the first week. And then 2 weeks later, we do our drive your tractor to church thing, right? We have this outside ceremony. We had 22 student athletes come to that. And it's just like, bang, it hit me like it's working. And, it's 8:30 on a Wednesday morning. We average 10 to 15 kids a week. It's not 27 every week. We get donuts. We listen to speakers. We listen to Bryce Weiler, who was born blind this past week. Mark Weiler, our radio guy, who had an accident and lost his leg. He's coming to speak, and, just trying to do these different things. We have different pastors come in. They've even roped me into doing a devotional. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is way out of my league. And I always think about the Brooks and Dunn song "Believe" that Jelly Roll and them just redid. And he's talking about, he's like, I can't quote the book, but I know there's something bigger. And that's kind of where I am, right? I don't know scripture by heart. I don't know all that stuff, but I do know that at the end of the day, that's where it's at, right? And there's something bigger out there. And if I can help lead one kid, or we, I say once again, we, as Knights for Christ, not me, I'm not doing it. It's us, and it's him doing it through us. If we can touch one person or give them one more avenue, then that's what we're there for.
The passion in your story there is evident. I love it. There's so much, the fact, and there's so much, there's some vulnerability there and some honesty that you're like, you started a youth group, a Christian youth group for athletes, knowing that you are not the authority, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, but that takes, I think that stops people. It stops people from wanting to do it because you're like, I don't know enough to do this. Yep. And it doesn't,
100%.
That doesn't matter. Right.
100%. And I'm going to use, I don't know if you know Dennis Conley, who was our athletic director for 40 years. His line every year was, I don't have all the answers, but I know the people that do. And that's kind of where Tim and Jim came into this. And I'm like, you know what? This is my opportunity. All the stars aligned for us to have this. And I didn't even know it was something that I needed, or that I wanted to do, or any of that. It just happened. Right. Which is how all these things happen. That's how he works. Right. It's when you least expect it. It's when you're doing all those things. And, even Pastor Tim, he's like, I drove by for 8 years, drove by Olney Central College. And his exact words were, here comes this big dude walking in the back of our church wearing an Olney Central shirt. And here we are. Right. We have, not only is he in there, he's part of what we're doing. And reaching these kids. And not only do we go to OCC, we have people from OCC at church every Sunday. And it's awesome to see these kids. It's awesome to see our players. I mean, when I was in high school, I talked earlier about my high school coach and the impact that he's had on my life and my career. We always laugh. He had 5 kids too. So we kind of have that bond also. But one thing that I remember is that we prayed right before we went on the court every single game. And for years, I would do our last speech right before we go out on the court. Our girls would all leave and I would stand in the corner and I'd bow my head and I would say the similar prayer to what we said in high school. I did it before every game. And then finally this year I was like, Coach Baker, I said, we're going to start something new this year. And he's like, what's that? I said, we're going to pray before we go on the floor. So Coach Baker, myself, we've had our players do it. Pastor Tim stepped in when he can be there. We have Nate Whistler, who helps with FCA around here as well, who comes in. And it's the last thing we do before we leave the locker room is we gather around, we put our arms around each other and we say a prayer. And we actually Saturday, our girls, we were kind of rushed because our locker room was a little farther away. We get out on the floor and they're like, Coach, we didn't pray. And I said, okay, come here. And we literally gathered on the floor and put our arms around each other and prayed before starting lineups. And I was like, so it wasn't me saying, hey, we forgot to pray. It was our girls that it came. And it's one of those things where, and it was even one of our players that doesn't even come to Knights for Christ, that she doesn't even come to the church stuff. But she was like, Coach, we didn't pray. And I think that's the little things that are making that difference.
What's the transformation you see in yourself in your coaching?
I'm a very intense human being. I'm loud. I get after a little bit. And I think it's one of those things where my language, I've tried to clean my language up. I've talked with Pastor Tim and Coach Baker a lot about that, and I'm still not perfect at all. But that's something that I kind of took for granted. And it was just like, you know what? I don't want my kids doing that. I don't want my players, so I shouldn't be doing it. And like I said, I'm still not perfect. I still, say things I shouldn't, but that's something that I've done a lot better job of. And I was always a guy that, like I said, got onto our officials and kind of, was very animated. But I was also the guy that after a game would be like, hey, you guys worked hard. You did a good job. Because like I've said, I've tried to be able to leave things at home. And one thing, even just not even on officials and coaching, one thing that I've kind of been able to do a little better in the last few years is I've always tried to compartmentalize. And I always talk to our players about my 10-minute drive home. It takes me 10 minutes to get from my house to the college. And it's where I take off my Superman suit of coaching and put on my dad outfit, right? Or vice versa. I go from, dealing with my kids and being dad to now I've got to refocus and be coach again. And I think that's something that every father, every coach has had to do. And I always tell them, don't ruin my 10-minute drive home. That's my piece, right? So if it's easier to unwind that day or whatever. But yeah, I've really changed the way I speak to officials. I've really tried to change my language and those types of things. And like I said, I want my kids to be proud. My wife, she got on to me one night because she works at the elementary school now. And we had a Richland County recognition night and a lot of her people from where she works were there. And I put on a show for her and she wasn't very happy with me. So, it's something that I've really changed the way I think a clipboard was involved. But I've changed the way that I
yeah, I don't think they make clipboards as sturdy as they need to be.
I have a stash of them. I actually had one that had been through a lot this year, and I was talking to our girls, and I kind of hit it, and it broke in half. And at halftime, I brought out another one, and one of our fans was like, "Do you just have a collection of them?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do."
Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness, using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mental Metal Coaching. In 2020, my life changed forever. I survived cancer, a stroke, and the mental issues that came with that. And those challenges gave me new perspective on life and resilience. And that's why I created Mental Metal Coaching, to share what I've learned and help others grow stronger. I work with athletes, coaches, and professionals who are ready for a challenge and ready to embrace growth. Whether you're striving for excellence on the field, inspiring your team, or looking to elevate your career, Mental Metal Coaching offers individual coaching, group sessions, and workshops tailored to your needs. Your next chapter of growth starts now. Contact me today. Details are in the show notes, and let's forge your metal. So one of the things you said, you mentioned about how you're not doing it perfect. You're trying, but you're not making it perfect. And I think that I would encourage you to go actually read about the disciples and the 12 apostles, because they were deeply flawed men, right? Well, they were not, they were, yeah. And it's like, I think God changes your heart first, and then your actions are part of your job to kind of change that. But I think that as long as your heart's in the right place, and it obviously it is with you leading this Knights for Christ thing, you're going in the right direction, which is all people can ask for.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I spent a lot of time talking to Pastor Tim and Coach Baker about stuff, and Coach Baker has an analogy that it's kind of like a banana. When you put pressure on it and you squeeze it, what's going to come out? And he actually talked. Some of the things that he talked about was that, and then he talked about the path that we live with life, right? And that you're on this path to what it looks like, and there's exits, and people are going to take exits, and you may get off on that exit with somebody, and I've done that. I've got off on that exit with the wrong people, and getting back on there. And I think, and I, my wife and I have been together for a long time. She's the one that centers me. My parents are very involved in our life. They come to games, they help babysit, but my wife is one of those that if I have a bad game, she's going to tell me about it. And she's going to be the first one that'll tell me congratulations on a big night too. Her and Coach Baker's, set up this big thing after my 200th win. So she's the one that's in my corner, but we help hold each other accountable too. And I think Coach Baker and Pastor Tim are two people that have really been able to help me get one on the right path. And I've always said this, it's about the people that you're around that make whatever you're doing worthy or worthwhile or whatever. And my family, my wife, my kids, my parents, my in-laws, all those people, my circle has gotten a lot smaller, but we actually have a quote on our board is make sure everybody's rowing the boat and nobody's drilling holes while you're not looking. And I think that's the thing that's been the biggest change in my life is I've got some people off my boat that were drilling holes in them. And where everybody that is in my boat now seems to be rowing in the same direction. And it makes it a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. When you talk about a coach and you talk about living with certain circles around you, you have to remember as a coach, you have all your players there and you are in their circle, whether they want it or not. Right. So it's a little bit of pressure on the coach. And I think it's even a better reason why, you leading your life a little bit closer to Christ and giving that good example to them is so important because you are in their circle whether they wanted to run, unless they leave the team or whatever. They're a little bit of a captive audience. They're a captive circle, which
Yeah.
gives you a lot of responsibility as a coach.
Yeah, and you're the standard. I watch a lot of stuff that's from What Drives Winning with Brett Ledbetter, and he played at SWIC and he played at Missouri St. Louis when I was at Southern Illinois. So I know Brett personally a little bit, and some of the stuff. And one of them was like, you have to set the standard, but then you have to be the standard. And I think that's something that as a parent probably I've learned the most is, hey, don't do this while you're doing it. Right? Don't use this kind of language. Well, it's what you say, and they're watching, and it's the same thing with our players. And we like I referred to the game the other day against Logan. We went into overtime on the road, and it was the most calm I've ever been in overtime of a game in my entire career coaching. And Coach Baker was like, man. He was like, you are different in overtime than I've ever seen you coaching. And he's watched me the last 3 or 4 years. And he was like, our girls responded to that. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, we were composed. He was like, and I've got to the point, and I go back to my wife, who's been at almost every game for 15 years. She's like, I wish I could text you during the games and tell you to shut up and focus on the team and not the refs. And it's something that now that she's pointed that out and I've seen it, and Coach Baker talked about, like, oh my gosh, I've actually sat down more this year than I ever have coaching. I've never sat down, and it's kind of that recentering. It's like, okay, and I literally will go sit down on the bench, and I'm like, okay, now I've got to refocus. Where's my focus, and where's my energy being spent? Because we talk about with our girls controlling the controllables. And if you're focused on the outside stuff, then you can't coach. And it's that I've really, like you said, I'm working on.
It's one of my pet peeves that a coach that will tell his players, complain about his players having bad body language, complaining to the refs, and do this stuff, and then you watch them on the sideline doing the exact same things that they're. It's like that's your job, and you're not doing it the way you want them to do their job. You have to model that. You just do.
And that's, like I said, that's probably one of the areas that I've really, when you ask, what have I changed? That's the things that I'm trying to change is where's my energy going? Because I feel like that between Coach Baker and I, we've got a pretty good staff that we can out coach some people down the stretch, and we just got to have the pieces in the right spot. And like I said, when I'm externally focused, it's hard to get that focus on us and what we need to do. And it's something that, I've really tried to slow down. Coach Baker and I and Pastor Tim, we started doing daily devotionals with the Bible app and stuff like that. And it really is one of those things where, learning that every day and going through a scripture or whatever it is, it gives that 2-3 minute devotional. A lot of that stuff is like, oh man, that's what I was doing, or that's what I'm doing. And, not that I was a bad person, or doing things wrong. It's just, hey, here's some life to it, and we've got to grow. And
so
my mental health is so much better.
Yeah. Right.
You're able to handle those things more because, at the end of the day, you can't control some things, and you've got help. You've got the right people in your circle.
Yeah, but having the right focus and calming down a little bit and doing things a little bit differently, a little bit more Christ-like, it doesn't mean your kids aren't playing hard, and it doesn't mean you aren't still winning games, right?
Yep. And, we've been able to accomplish some stuff this year that I didn't think we would be able to. Like I said, we're playing with 7 kids. And, we're sitting in the top 3 or 4 in our region. We're 500, which doesn't sound great, but we're playing with 7 kids.
Yeah.
And they're fighting and they're scratching and clawing. And I'll be the first to admit that sometimes when the banana gets squeezed, the good doesn't count with them.
Right.
But you know what? They've been through a lot, and they're tested and tested and tested every single day and every night. And we've been proud of them. And like I said, they've been really good for us. And we're trying to keep that faith going and keep them going on the right track.
I love it, Coach. It's good stuff, and I love a good transformation story, because I think that a lot of people think incorrectly that we are what we are, and you can't really change that. And it's nonsense. It's you can and you should be looking for ways to get better. And when you talk about your mental health getting better, your mental health as a coach, because it can be a struggle for a lot of coaches. Your mental health is it's kind of your responsibility. It's something you can change, and it's something you should try to change and make for the better.
100%. And honestly, I've always been the type of person that, and especially as a coach, not maybe as a player as much, but as a coach, I've really made it a point to try not to live on those highs and lows. And it's not been easy. But like I said, I have, over my 15 years, and we talk, my wife and I have talked about how we handle our kids with coaches, because we, as a coach, as a former player, I always say that a parent is our worst enemy, because all they got to do is plant a seed on the car ride home or on the couch at night. And then all it takes is a little bit of water, and that seed grows into doubt. It grows into that. So we've made it a point not to portray what we feel about their youth sports coaches or whatever onto them. We may not always agree with things that are being done or whatever, but we've made it a vow to never talk about a kid's coach in front of our kids. But we've also learned how to parent more, and we've learned as parents of things not to do based on my players' parents have handled them, and the positive and negative effects that it's had their mental health. And we've had kids that are scared to play bad because mom and dad are going to yell at them or whatever. And, we've made it a point with our kids who are now, we've got a 5th grader, a 3rd grader that are starting to play some travel sports. They're starting to get into school sports and stuff. And I had a conversation with my son who just played 3rd grade basketball for the first time this year. He was like, "What do you think about how I played today?" And I said, "Pause. Do you want dad or do you want coach?"
It's hard. It's so hard. It's so hard.
And I had a 5-minute conversation, and I don't know if he truly understand. I said, "If you want to be good and you want me to help you, I will. But I'm not going to push that on you until you understand that." And I said, "I want you to have fun. I want you to play." And he's like, "Dad, I want to be good at basketball." And I'm like, "There we go. Then I can help you. But I'm not going to push it on you." And we've always said our kids are going to love or hate basketball. My wife loves basketball. Obviously, you have to be a coach's wife. But it's what we watch. It's what we do. We're on the road recruiting. We were at a gym till 9:30 last night watching high school games. It's just what we do. Our kids have grown up in a gym, so they're either going to love it or hate it. And we've kind of made it a point for our mental health, like, hey, our middle son doesn't really like sports. So for our mental health, hey, we've got to accept that, right? And being able to do those things. And we want them to be the best, and we want them to be successful, but maybe they won't be. And that's okay too.
You got a whole nother journey coming up, Coach, with your kids going through it. It's a lot. So we're getting about out of time here. So is there anything I didn't ask that I should have?
No, man, I appreciate the time, and I appreciate what you're doing. I have, even before we started this Knights for Christ, I mean, in my 15 years, this is crazy. I've had 3 different players that have came to me about contemplating suicide. And you read year in and year out the number of college athletes that have committed suicide. There's a documentary by Michael Phelps called "The Price or the Weight of Gold," the cost of gold, or whatever it is. And you talk about mental health is a epidemic in our country, in our society. And I think, like I said, I wasn't planning on starting Knights for Christ. I wasn't, none of this, it all just happened. And I think it was my paying attention to mental health and kind of what can we do as coaches? Because like you said earlier, we are the extension of parents to these girls and these players. And we're the first ones that get a phone call when their tire's flat, when they're out of gas, when they have a wreck, when anything happens, we're the call. And, we've got to be there. We've got to be that standard for them. And like I said, we're the first defense of mental health. And if we're not taking care of ours, like you said, it's our responsibility. If we're not taking care of what we're doing, then how do we help them? And that's kind of made a priority in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. We, as a coaches need to recognize that a little bit more, that is a responsibility. And the way you coach your players, you are in a very powerful position to either make their mental health worse or better.
Yep.
And it is your, you can complain all you want about the state of the world today, and it won't change a thing, but you are in a position to either help or hurt that. And honestly, if you're not into doing that, I don't think you ought to be coaching.
And control the controllables. I can't control what's going on in Missouri or Texas, right, but I can control what's going on with my currently 9 players. Yeah. I can control that with my 5 children. I can control that. And like you said, you can't just put your head in the sand and pretend like it doesn't exist. I think a lot of coaches abuse their power. They abuse the position they're in. And at the end of the day, the kids have the power, and we've got to be able to find a way to get the most out of them, and whatever that looks like. And like I said, I've made my career on empowering our girls and trying to make them feel empowered, on the floor, off the floor, make them know they're capable of stuff, and trying to be there for them. And it's something we'll continue to do here at OCC as long as they let me call the shots on the women's basketball side. We're going to continue to set that standard and, try to show these girls that what it looks like at the next level.
Yeah, it's good stuff, Coach. I appreciate you coming on the show. I love the work you're doing, and I wish you the best success on growing the program and growing the Knights for Christ. And proud of you. It's awesome.
Well, I appreciate you, man. This is an awesome podcast. Like I said, I've started watching, I started following some of your stuff once you came and talked to our district, and mental health side of it really has been something that I've always talked about, being a huge part of what we do. And I appreciate people like you who are out trying to bring it to the forefront, because I think the more we talk about it, as coaches, as adults, I think the more our children are able to talk about it, and our student athletes and all of that stuff. And that that's not a weakness. To me, you got to be stronger to come out and talk about stuff that's vulnerable.
100%. Absolutely. It's a whole lot. Like vulnerability is one of the toughest things you can do.
100%. But it's one of the most important too, for relationships and everything. You got to have that.
Absolutely. Awesome, Coach. I sure appreciate it. And we'll be in touch.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having us on, and we look forward to following you more.
Are you ready to take on the toughest opponent you've ever faced? Yourself. At Mental Metal Coaching, I work with athletes, coaches, and professionals who are up for a challenge and ready to grow. Through individual coaching, group coaching, and professional development for schools and businesses, we'll help you build confidence, resilience, and a mindset that seeks growth. If you're serious about becoming your best, let's get started. Check out the show notes for my contact information, and together, let's forge your metal. Metal is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your metal. And if you listen to the Mental Metal podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Metal podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your metal. So I think I'd like to end this podcast, this episode of the Mental Metal podcast, with a little bit of a call to action. Of course, I put this podcast out helping the people to think things differently and change the way they do some things and look at things in a different light. But I think in this, the end of my, call to faith in athletics in the month of February that I've been working on, it's a good opportunity here to put a little more of a call to action, probably specifically to coaches that are listening to this. And I just felt compelled to do it after listening to the last few episodes, again, with Blake Yeager, who had a huge transformation from his childhood to now being a believer and a team chaplain, and to Jarrett Brown, East Peoria, who was last week's episode, and just talking about hitting rock bottom and having to learn how to do things upside down and do it more in a Christ-like way, and just the change he had to see in himself to see the change in the way he wanted to coach. And then now with Clint Burris, who is very, kind of new in that transformation, but seeing his passion there, but wanting to do things differently and also wanting to lead others in faith. I am kind of inspired to listen to these gentlemen and really, and I'm really inspired by their vulnerability and their openness, and not just on the way that they come on the show and talk about it in a public setting, but also in the way that they're doing it with their athletes and their teams and the people they work with. And I talk about it all the time with my clients. I talk about on this podcast and things like this. But being vulnerable and being open is, I think, historically been seen as being the opposite of being tough. Like we always would see a tough individual be somebody who's like very grizzled and almost hermit like and all this, and it's not. It's that old curmudgeon attitude that I never go to the doctor. I don't open up about things and like that. That's human nature. That's easy. That's not getting anywhere. That's not growth. That's not tough. That's honestly weakness that we've portrayed as tough for some reason. And you want to talk about tough, it's guys like that have come on the show here and open up about their lives and their changes and how they're leading people and doing it in not necessarily having all the answers, but are trying anyway and moving forward and be like, hey, like Clint said a lot of this. He's like, I'm not perfect at it. I don't necessarily know what I'm doing, but and even the fact that he said, I started this Knights for Christ, almost for me as much as it is for the athletes. That's very vulnerable. That's very open. And I think that is a key step in moving forward. And we talk about it in every one of these, and they just talk about that transformation and how that openness and that willingness and that vulnerability led to transformation. And it didn't just transform their lives, it transformed their careers and their coaching and what they're doing. And now that they use their faith as this guide to mental toughness and the way that they trying to lead their athletes, and they're not now pumping out all these athletes that are weak and soft. It's that is not the goal, and that's not what they're getting. They're showing um, they're being an example through faith and through toughness and doing these things, and it's man, it's inspiring to me, and that's the call to action. And I think one of the reasons we don't do it as the coaches is coaches are really always worried about or always concerned with the competency that they portray. And I get that. You want to be like, hey, the one of the worst things that, a fan or a parent or somebody's going to say about a coach is he just doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know or she doesn't know what she's doing about coaching, about basketball or volleyball or whatever. Like they just don't even know the game. And so coaches are always worried about competency. And that drives coaches a lot. And you should want to know your game. You want to study the game, and you want to be as, so in different situations you can respond and know how to lead your team. And, depending on the defenses or the offenses that people throw at you, and it's knowing what to do, you got to have that competency, and you got to know how to teach kids to have the skills, and you want to do this. And I think that this need to be competent in our coaching career is one of the reasons that it's faith is scary. right? Or involving faith, because faith is something that you're never going to be completely competent at, right? It's you're going to struggle at it forever. Like Clint said a lot in this episode, that he's like, I still make mistakes. I still don't do it right. I'm trying. And that right there is that vulnerability of saying, hey, I'm going to try to do this even though I know I'm going to make mistakes. And I think it's hard sometimes in our faith because we have this shining example of in Jesus of being perfect, right? And that's what we're trying to be. And that's the model that we have. That's the example we have that we want to look up for. And this is what we're trying to be, knowing that we will never, ever get there. Romans tells us, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So we're not getting there. It's not going to happen, but we have to try to get there. So, but I think that you need to understand that if you are a coach and you are interested in leaning into your faith and making your faith more public, and I think you should, and I think that it's a great opportunity to do this. And I know that there's issues against it or issues with it in different public settings and things like that. I understand that, but you can still example it, and people can know that that's what you're about. Don't let your worries about your imperfection as a Christian keep you from sharing that message and trying to be that example. That old expression of don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I think that really, really works for our faith. If you cannot wait until your faith is perfect to share it, or you will never share it, right? So you have to be, as you bring people in and you talk to people about their faith, and you walk with them in the journey. It's not, you're not the example, but you know who the example is, and you can show that. And through, you show that it's Christ, and this is what we're trying to be. But you can always say, I'm not perfect. I'm just trying. And I think that that's I think it's a good metaphor for everything we do, because it's easy to say that we're never going to be a perfect Christian, but are we ever going to be the perfect basketball player or basketball coach or volleyball coach? Or we're never going to be perfect. There's still things that we want to continue to learn, and I think that understanding that is really powerful. And I love how I see it in the way that Coach Brown and Coach Burris are starting to lead their teams. You see it in them that it's the less egotistical and less about their power and more about that upside down and more about that. Burris talked about giving the power to his athletes and just helping them become their best. And that is a little bit of the servant leadership. And he kept saying, it's not my team, it's our team. And that is it's a great mindset to have, and it's a hard one for some or for some coaches to buy into. It's very difficult, but I think it's something worth shooting for, and I think leaning into your faith is going to help you do that. So that's my call to action: is to if you are a Christian and you're trying to lean into your faith more, but you're not sure how that applies to your coaching and working with others, know that it really does. It's a perfect situation. It is, it's that place in life that you probably are really, really passionate about, is your coaching. Well, that's a great place to apply it, because he talked about when you squeeze a banana, that's what do you want to have come out, right? When we get under pressure, our true self comes out. And I think that the more that you can continue to work on your true self and what's inside, it's going to show when times of trouble that people see. And that's what we want to show. That's what you want out of your athletes. Whenever the game's on the line, you want to see that confidence and that work that they put in. You want to see that come out. And so if that's the faith that you want to have, you got to practice it, be ready for it. So when trouble comes, that's what people see, and that's the example. Knowing you're never going to be perfect, but that's what you want. And I just love it. So that's my call to action: is find a way to do that, lean into your faith, and then try to weave it into the way that you coach and the way that you lead, because it's going to be all good things. So it's just been a great month here in February. Some really good guests, and I suggest, if you haven't, go back and listen to them. It's just really good stuff on using faith as
motivator and a way towards mental toughness, you can go back to the first episode of February. I talk about the monthly medal challenge, which is something I'm doing every month for the year of 2025. And my focus for February was all faith. And I am really leaning into my biblical reading every morning, a lot more prayer. And I am seeing, I wanted this reading of the Bible and more study groups that I'm in now, and then my own prayer to increase my toughness and increase my resilience and my faith and just everything. And I'm starting to see starting to see a difference. I'm starting to see prayers answered. I'm starting to believe a little bit more, and it's a good feeling to do just by leaning into it. And it's helping me through some difficult things that are going on in my life right now. And it has been, it's one of those God things that I didn't, I started this thing in February, not knowing, like, just because I knew I wanted to do it because I thought it would be a good idea. And then it turns out that I ended up needing it in the month of February and beyond here with some stuff that's going on. It's been really helpful for me. And that's just the way that God works sometimes. So I'm really thankful the way it has worked out. It's been a great month. I'm going to continue to do it. I'm going to continue to do more of the reading, more of the praying. I've seen such an improvement in my faith and my toughness and my forging my own medal. It's something I'm not going to stop once February is over, but I am going to come back next episode in March and start a new monthly medal tactic, and the monthly medal challenge continues. And if you've been in with me for right now so far, then I appreciate it. I think that you're doing it, but be ready for a different one in March. And as always, if you're enjoying what I'm saying, and I'm starting to get more texts and more emails, I can't tell you how much I enjoy this and how much I like hearing that people are paying attention and like the content that I'm putting out. So I thank you for all the emails, all the texts, and I really thank you for the shares. If you like what I'm saying, if you like what my guests are saying, and you think this is helpful and you think this is something that we need more in the world, then share it. Like, share, subscribe, all those things. I can't thank you enough for those to be able to do that. So it's just been a great episode, great month, and I'm going to continue next month. So I will see you there. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. This has been the Mental Medal Podcast, and always remember to forge your medal. Thanks for listening to the Mental Medal Podcast. Don't forget to tune in every week for more insights and strategies to help you forge mental toughness and resilience. This podcast is brought to you by Mental Medal Coaching, where we are driven by a passion for sharing knowledge and experience that empowers others to play, live, and grow with confidence. Our mission is to instill a resilient and spirited mindset in our clients, enabling them to confidently face adversity and actively seek new challenges for personal growth. At Mental Medal Coaching, we offer individual coaching, group coaching, and professional development for schools and businesses. Whether you're an athlete, educator, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential and thrive in every area of life. Until next time, keep growing, stay resilient, and always remember to forge your medal.